Uh, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very hot welcome to all of you. More than warm, hot welcome even this afternoon for this very, very important lecture on a subject which should be close to all our hearts, but is somehow not getting the kind of attention that it should in our country. We will be hearing about saving India's endangered film heritage, a cultural necessity. We'll all agree that it's a cultural necessity, but what is being done about it is something that is possibly not meeting the requirements of it being a cultural necessity. I'm sure our speaker for this afternoon, Shivendra Singh Dungarpur, will touch on some of these points and possibly also enlighten us with some of the real heritage that we have and the valuable heritage that we have in the realm of film and cinema. I would like to request Dr. Joyanta Sengupta, the Secretary and Curator of Victoria Memorial Hall, to kindly say a few words and welcome the audience as well as introduce the speaker for this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's lecture on saving India's endangered film heritage, a cultural necessity. And it's a privilege and an honor for the Victoria Memorial Hall to have with us perhaps India's most renowned film conservation activist and the founder of Film Heritage Foundation, Mumbai, Sri Shivendra Singh Dungarpur. He is an award-winning filmmaker, archivist and restorer who passionately believes in the cause of film preservation and restoration. And the organization he founded in 2014, the Film Heritage Foundation, is dedicated to supporting the conservation, preservation and restoration of the moving image and to developing interdisciplinary programs to create awareness about the language of cinema. It is the only non-governmental organization in the country working in the field of film preservation. Many in this hall are well aware of the phenomenal work Shivendra ji has been doing in this field as an untiring crusader. And some aspects of it were already showcased in the landmark workshop he conducted during the Kolkata International Film Festival 2018. But for those who are less familiar with his work, I should also highlight his work as an award-winning filmmaker. His first documentary, titled Celluloid Man, pays tribute to India's legendary archivist P.K. Nair, while celebrating the history of Indian cinema and making a fervent plea for its preservation and restoration. His second documentary, titled The Immortals, told the story of Indian cinema through the visual exploration of physical artifacts, personal spaces, and living memories. He has celebrated on 2 world-class restoration projects with Martin Scorsese's World Cinema Foundation. The first is Uday Shankar's classic film Kalpana, and the other one, the eminent Sri Lankan filmmaker Lester James Perez's film Nidhanaya, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2012. Shivendra ji was a donor also for the restoration of Alfred Hitchcock's silent film titled The Lodger, which was done by the British Film Institute. Shivendra Singh Dungarpur has directed and produced over 600 commercials, short films and documentaries under the banner Dungarpur Films, one of the most reputed production houses in India. He has also been invited to be a member of, or has been elected to, several of the leading bodies that work in the field of motion pictures. I will mention just 3 of them. The Executive Committee of the International Federation of Film Archives in its 2017 Congress hosted by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles, which gives out the Oscars. The Artistic Committee of the Il Cinema Ritrovato Festival in Bologna, in Italy, and the Honorary Committee of the Nitrate Picture Show, which is George Eastman House's Festival of Film Conservation. Today, Shivendra ji is going to speak on the colossal loss of India's audiovisual heritage and also on the lack of recognition for film as an art form and an integral part of our cultural fabric. And most importantly, he's going to speak on the urgent need to preserve what remains of this heritage. As we museums and other cultural institutions keep grappling with the question of what is heritage and keep getting bogged down in a neat binary of tangible and intangible cultural heritage, what Shivendra ji is going to talk about today is of huge importance to us. So that's all I have to say for now. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Shivendra Singh Dungarpur to speak on saving India's endangered film heritage, a cultural necessity. Yes.
So before he takes the microphone, a small little memento from Victoria Memorial Hall. And assisting Shivendra ji, we have Rohini Singh over there, who will be helping with the visuals. Thank you very much for doing that. And we shall be extremely thankful to all of you. And I want to just remind you that after the talk is over, please do not forget to switch on your mobile phones again.
And also after the talk, I'm happy to answer questions and answers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, first of all, for all of you being here on this, as Mr. Rahman said, on a very, very hot day. But I want to thank you, Mr. Rahman, and thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for giving me to speak for the cause of film and our moving film heritage. And I'm particularly happy that this talk is happening at such an iconic institution. It's really, really an honor. You know, I couldn't have imagined that one day I would be speaking here as a child when I used to pass this wonderful, great heritage site and museum. You know, I'm often asked why I needed to start a foundation to save films. Do films really need to be saved at all? With a million versions across, so many medias you have, surely films will survive in some form or the other. You don't need a foundation to do this. Many leading filmmakers in the country, in all their earnestness, have said to me that their films are preserved on YouTube, cloud, DVDs, hard disk. But more on that later. Let me fundamentally ask you, are films important enough in the larger scheme of things that need attention to warrant this kind of time, energy, and money to save them for posterity? In a country obsessed with cinema, there are very few, including the film industry, who feel that films are really worth saving for future generations. And when we talk about film, unfortunately, the immediate association is Bollywood, 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 or business, or mass entertainment. We only see commerce and really fail to see the impeccable art in these so many wonderful films which we have grown up with or we've been associated with. What about the documentaries, the experimental films, the short films, the newsreels, propaganda films, television series, home movies? What about these wonderful forms of images that make up the basic fabric of our wonderful film heritage? Unfortunately, the popular cinema has sort of engulfed the public imagination, and we tend to forget that the moving image was one of the greatest innovations of the 20th century, changing our perception of the world and giving us the ability to capture a reflection of ourselves and the times we lived in. As my great friend and one of the greatest visual artists, Tacita Dean, put it so beautiful in her petition to save films. She said, film is the Rosetta Stone of our time. What a wonderful quote. And I want to remind viewers of this wonderful quote when you see Tagore, what he felt. Someone like Tagore, he saw the evolution of art in it. And just look at this. He said, that the principal element of motion picture is the flux of images. The beauty and the grandeur of this form in motion has to be developed in such a way that it becomes self-sufficient without the use of words. I hope the Bollywood is listening. Without the use of words. I believe that the expected emergence of cinema as an art form is yet to take place. We all know that he was credited with Natal Puja. There's a lot of debate on that. But the great poet, thinker and artist had no doubt about the artistry and the unique language of the moving image. But nearly a century later, the film is still fighting for its acceptance as an art form. We believe that film is an art form that is integral part of our social and our cultural fabric, and yet we have to fight for the audiovisual medium to be considered to be part of our heritage. Is film to be damned because it not only entertains? In this scenario, it is not surprising that film is, I was just talking to Dr. Sengupta, and I was very happy to know that they are creating a film club or they're going to show films, but film is completely absent from museums in India. Around the world, museums like Museum of Modern Art, Smithsonian, the Imperial War Museum. My friend Madhuja is sitting here. She was asking for something to be done with one of the museums in Mumbai. When Tacita Dean came, we couldn't arrange a projector for her, slide projector, because none of the museums in Bombay had that. And you look at the universities in America, whether it's Yale, UCLA, name the universities. They have outstanding film collections with film archives, and they're not normal film archives. UCLA Film and Television Archive is the second largest film archive in the world. They have their own film vaults, archivists regularly curate film programming the year round. In India, we have fantastic documentaries and experimental films made by leading artists, activists, independent filmmakers that are celebrated internationally but have no platform in this country. Many of these films are shot on celluloid, and these are collections which should be maintained and showcased in museums. Now, I want to show you an image of someone whom I was really, as a child, had the opportunity to travel. I'm very fond of bird watching, and my father being an environmentalist, I had this great opportunity to spend time with Dr. Salim Ali. And I was in conversation with BNHS, and these are how the films of Dr. Salim Ali was lying. And the BNHS, is sitting on a trove of the famous ornithologist Dr. Salim Ali's film that had been rotting away in a corner of the office for years, as nobody felt it was important that they need to be preserved or screened or educated. And for us, when we got into the picture, that was my own initiative to really go there and convince a board which we didn't lack, I'm saying, from the Godreges to the Tatas, the BNHS. And it's a very interesting story that they met me and they said, the first thing, that can someone from Bollywood look at this film? And I was thinking twice that Bollywood, I just couldn't get the connect. And the president of the BNHS, Mr. Homi Khushu Khan, said, is there not somebody you're working with, Mr. Bachchan, can they not look into this and things? And I asked him, sir, finally, why are you asking? Because it's film. And I was shocked. Just because it's celluloid film, they could not differentiate between that all films means Bollywood. So what we are taking on a mobile today, should we call Bollywood for that also? I mean, it was such a sad affair that for 30 years after Dr. Salim Ali's films, they kept them, they go down. And now, all his films with notes written to be shown, finally will have to be all thrown because they've all finished off. And that comes from the strong belief that they could not differentiate between the visual medium. For them, anything on celluloid is Bollywood. And I have my theory. Sir, you're starting something on Gandhiji, but I have a very different theory on it. The father of a nation was the view that cinema was a social evil. I have a wonderful letter by K. Abbas. Abbas Saab, the well-known Indian filmmaker, most of you will know, wrote a letter to Mahatma Gandhi in his open letter. It was in October 1939. And he said, "To whom shall we, the sons of India, go for consolation and guidance, but to you, you whom we have come to love and honor like a father. Today I bring for your scrutiny and approval a new toy my generation has learned to play, the cinema. In a recent statement, you include cinema among evils like gambling, horse racing, which you would like to banish. In view of the great position you hold in this country, I may say in the world, even the slightest expression of your opinion carries much weight with the millions of people. I have no doubt that a large number of conservative and orthodox persons in the country will be confirmed in their hostile attitude towards cinema after reading your statement. There must be some great evil in cinema if the Mahatma does not approve of it. And one of the most useful inventions would be allowed to be discarded." And ironically, even today in the Indian Constitution, cinema is mentioned as a state list. It's under section 62 in the 7th schedule of the state list, which deals with taxes on luxuries, taxes on entertainment, amusement, betting and gambling. As a matter of fact, the current Indian laws dealing with cinema focuses only on censorship and taxation. And that is what dictates the interest and the dialogue of the film industry with the government. It's so unfortunate. I have nothing against, Gandhiji saw Ram Rajya. And I'm wondering what film did he see that he started disliking it so much? Probably, I wish he had seen Eisenstein and Podolkin and those kind of films, or there were people who could have shown him. His viewpoint would have been different. We celebrated a century of cinema 5 years ago. But were pioneers like Dasa, Phalke, Hiralal Sen, Baburao Painter, V. Shantaram not artists whose work must be preserved? Now, if you really look at this, if you really look at a film like Kagas Ke Phool, India's first CinemaScope film, directed by Guru Dutt, when it was released, the film was not successful at the box office. It was only in the 1980s, when it started being viewed in film society movements, and interest in Guru Dutt revived, that people started showing interest in the film. So a film may be released at a particular time, but it is viewed differently at different times. And it is this timeless quality of cinema that makes it so important to preserve films. And I keep giving this example of Govinda, who's a really Bollywood big star at one time, not doing too many films today, or famous is Fearless Nadia. She was actually Mary Evans, as she was called. She was an Australian who did very well with the Wadia movie tones. And if you really look at her, they were really regarded as C-grade films, not even A, B. Nair Sahib used to constantly, when I was wanting to use some of the footage, he would say, "My God, you can't be watching those films." But she's become a current figure today. So when you're viewing something, when they were released, they may be looked at C-grade films. But today they're looked as some sort of a cult films. And that is why a film has to be preserved in order that people find new values in the film in another time. But why look back so much? Mansoor Khan made a film called Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak. And he wanted to celebrate 25 years of Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak. So he asked, "Leke aao bhai film." Suddenly his production guy said, "Sir, here is the DVD, sir." He says, "I never made the film on DVD. You mean to say that in my 25th anniversary, I'm going to show a DVD? DVD is actually a home video. It's equivalent to what Super 8 or 8mm used to be. And theoretically, lawfully, you need to take special permission to show DVDs on a larger crowd. In museum spaces and archives, it's fine. But publicly on making money, you're not allowed." So he said, I want to have the celluloid. I want to see the film in the manner in which I shot, and especially when you're celebrating 25. But where is the film? There was no negative. There was no film. Gulzar Saab was given Dasa Phalke Award. The government of India wanted to show marches. How old is marches? Yeah, But where is it? Where is it? It's gone. And we continue to churn out films at this incredible rate. Must we not care for the ones that came before and we have learned from? Now, I'm going to just show you a video which while shooting Celluloid Man, I was actually walking in one of the suburbs of Mumbai in Pathanwadi, and I was taken by this guy called Bipin Silver. His name was Bipin Silver, and you will understand why his name was Silver. So have a look at this video, which will give you an insight.
60 mm और पूरी पिक्चर लगी 4-5 रुपए की, और जहाँ 100 ड्रिल लेंगे तो 200-300 रुपए की 100 ड्रिल, और 35 mm है ना, वो केजी के हिसाब से जो है 100 रुपए केजी.
As a child, my summer would be spent watching films with my grandmother. She would often book this entire cinema hall, and we would sit on the ground floor in the stalls. And I would be sitting right behind her, and we would watch films after films. I still remember those beautiful, colorful sets of Pakiza, Meena Kumari performing Inhi Lagone. And then from Calcutta, my grandfather would often bring these 16mm black and white prints of Devdas, Dobi Ka Zameen, Bandhani, and some of Raj Kapoor films. I remember singing to the songs of Shri Chazubis, Ramaiya Vasta Raiya. And here I am now, surrounded by film cans and films. The images I grew up watching, being washed away and turned into silver or colored bangles.
So Bipin, who is called Bipin Silver, he strips 1,000 kgs of film in one go. 50 films stripped there to extract 3 kgs of silver. 50 films to extract 3 kgs of silver. And as a silver scavenger, as I call him, his personal preference is nitrate. As you know, nitrate films have a better silver component. Most people do not understand what the earlier, before 1951, you had most of the films were on celluloid nitrate. And after 51, what came was acetate. And later it became polyester. So the nitrate was something which was how most of the films got burnt in projection and other mediums. You know, growing up, I always thought film would last forever. Somehow I never thought these images that seemed so much larger than life on screen evoked such powerful emotions, actually had such a fragile existence. And as a filmmaker, you know, one is so engrossed, and if you talk to any of the filmmakers, they're so engrossed in their craft of cinema that one tends to forget that the life of our creators is, if they're not preserved, it is only for that short span of time, you know. It's like Mr. Zanussi used to say, the life of a film is like a butterfly. It flies, it sort of feeds on the flowers, and then it sort of, if it is not preserved well, it sort of dies out. And like all filmmakers, we are all engrossed in the world of creation that we forget what we create is completely not our creation, but borrowed from life. And what is this life? It is you and I. It's people like us. For me, cinema is a reflection of who we are and where we came from. And in order to look at the future, one has to look at the past. Unless we know where we came from, we will not know where to go and who we are. And Manny Faber has given this wonderful quote, which you can read on this. So what is this magic of cinema that we all love? Those beautiful images projected onto the screen. You know, I remember as a child, fascinated with my grandfather's collections of Chaplin films. Every evening he would show me a Chaplin film, and I would be sitting next to the projector watching Chaplin. Actually, when you actually put the film into the projector, it goes upside down. And then I would be looking at the lampgate, and what fascinated was this magic, and Chaplin would come straight up, you know, it would go, his head will go down into the projector, and you would see him straight up performing. And even today, when I see a film on a celluloid, it's so magical, you know. I cannot even tell you that it's that magic which I still remember that when I watched my first film, I cried. I couldn't believe the reality of the life around me being played on a screen in this dark hall where the light was the light streaming through the projector. And I just was fortunate that I was able to spend, be in the same hall as Jean-Luc Godard, one of my great, and I'm sure a lot of people have liked him, but I had the fortune to meet him just about maybe 20 days ago in Lausanne, where he lives. And he was 88 years old, and this is what one of the quotes he had given, not at that time but before, but cinema is not an art that films life. Cinema is something between art and life. Unlike painting and literature, cinema both gives to life and takes it. But let me get to the hard reality of what exists in India. The journey of Indian cinema, you know, we all know that it began with Dadasaheb Phalke's Raja Harishchandra on May 3rd, 1913. And it was released as a 4-reel film, 3,700 feet long. Phalke has advertised the film as a performance with 57,000 photographs and picture 2 mile long, all for 3 hours. But this wonderful film, this Phalke's wonderful 2 mile long film, only 1 mile remains. And you can see the statistics of 1,700 silent films were made in India, of which the National Film Archive has about 5 to 6 so-called complete films. I mean, I doubt whether there's really a fully complete film, and about 10 to 12 films in fragments. The film, so we've lost nearly 99% of our silent film heritage. 99, nearly, or if not more. The film industry in Madras made 124 films and 38 documentaries. In the silent era, only 1 film survives, which is Martand Varma, 1931, which is also a Malayalam film. By 1950, India had lost something like 70 to 80% of our films and heritage. And some of the reasons of this is that I've already said that there was a fire which took place at the Film and Television Institute, not at the NFI, Film and Television Institute. It was a Prabhat vault which caught fire, and many of the original negatives of the nitrate, because nitrate is highly flammable. And there's a very interesting story of Phalke, and this is something which Peek and I have sort of discussed with me, that most of you believe that the first film surviving is 1913, Raja Harishchandra of Phalke. Now what happened is that Phalke, you know, those days, he had to really struggle to show his film around, and he was carrying it in his bullock cart. And in one of his travels on his bullock cart, the film caught fire in that heat, and the whole thing got burnt. And he had that, you know, print at that point in time, which he would showcase it everywhere. It wasn't like the later part where you make 100 prints or 50 prints, because you know, Mrs. Phalke was making all the sprockets and things. It was a lot of hard work. In the lab was inside their own house. So he went and reshot the film, the entire film. And Nair Sahab, who had collected Kalya Mardan, which also he got it in bits and pieces, and he had a Phalke diary and he put the whole Kalya Mardan together, told me that the reason he was able to make out the difference was that this film, which was 1917, which we believe is 1913, lying at the NFI, and which is publicized, is that all the women in that film were played by men, but in 1917, because he happened to get one woman, and she was actually the woman in that film, while the rest of them were men acting as women. But in 1913, everybody was men acting as women. So that one person, he was able to find out, in Phalke had written in some diary, that I had reshot, and the only difference you can make out between my two versions is that one role has been done by an actual woman. And that is how, even that, the 4-reel film has remained only with 2 reels. The 2 reels have gone. During the Second World War, you're sitting in Calcutta, B.N. Sarkar's new theatre studio in Calcutta. You know, it had resulting it was completely burned up. and most of the films of the new theatres in the 1930s were all lost. We've already spoken about the NFI fire. Then you had major fires at Ranjit movie tour. Chandu Lal Shah, who lost heavily in the races, and it's said that he only burned down the whole thing, as to many people claim that in order to get, he was badly in debt and to get insurance. And some of the most important films like Bhat Surdas and Holi and Kardar, all of them sort of got destroyed. If you really look at that, what were the real reasons for all these? One of the most important reasons was the climatic conditions. The climatic conditions were not ideal either for preserving. We know that the three major film industries came in three major port cities of Bombay, Madras and Calcutta, where the high humidity levels did its own damage. As most producers stored their films in labs or warehouses with no proper storage facilities. The usual practice for all producers was to pay an annual deposit fee to a lab to keep the original camera negative of the film. How the film was not successful, the producer would stop paying the deposit fee, resulting in labs dispatching the films to forgotten old warehouses. Now, one of the first losses, which is I think the most India's biggest loss, is that we don't have our first sound film. If you all of you know, the first sound film was Alamara in 1931, and I had the opportunity to talk to P.K. Nair and ask him that when he set up the National Film Archive, what did he do to get Alamara? And there is a small clip here, which we went to Jyoti Studio where he talks about it.
When I was assisting Gulzar Saab, he told me a story that when he was assisting Bimal Roy in Kabuliwala, Wazir Muhammad Khan, who acted in that film, used to often speak about singing the first ever song sung in the history of Indian cinema, De De Khuda Ke Naam, in the film Almara. Unfortunately, nothing remains of the song except the story.
This is a place I came way back in the 60s. I think it was 66 or 67, mainly to meet Ardeshir Rani, the father of Indian talkie. I wanted to meet him personally to see whether we could get hold of some reels of Alamara, the first Indian talkie, Right from the beginning when the archive started, one of the films we were clearly, eagerly looking forward to acquire was definitely Alamara. I went in and saw him sitting in the front of a big table, and nearby standing was his son Sapurji. So I told him about the archive and what we were trying to do and our keen interest in preserving the Alamara. He said a couple of reels must be lying somewhere here, though not the whole film. And of course he offered a lot of gold glass negatives of the Imperial films and whatever material they have in the studio, and kept it. He has asked his son to hand it over to us. When we were walking down the steps, Sapurji was also with me, and he himself confessed that I myself have disposed of the 3 reels which my father mentions after extracting silver from it. It's a kind of a confession from the son of the great pioneer. You see, as an archivist, I refuse to believe Alamara is permanently lost.
जब रिलीज हुई थी, क्योंकि मास्टर विठल का बहुत नाम था, मास्टर विठल उसमें हीरो थे, जिल्लूबाई माँ बनी थी, मोती एक एक्ट्रेस थी पहले, वो वैम बनी थी, उसमें पृथ्वीराज जी थे, और रिलीज हुई। और पहले ऐसे था कि पिक्चरें जब रिलीज होती थी तो लोग काफ़ी देखने आते थे, बड़ी भीड़ होती थी। पूरे कलकत्ते में कोहराम मच गया। ऐसा हुआ कि अरे वो हीरो बोलता है, वो बोलती है, वो बोलता है, ये कैसे हो सकता है? ये तो हम लोग साइलेंट मूवी देखते थे जिसमें कि जैसे जो भी सीन लड़ाई झगड़ा ये वगैरह वगैरह होता था तो टाइटल आता था। जैसे उसने कहा कि तुम यहाँ क्यों आए, जाओ यहाँ से, तो टाइटल आएगा तुम यहाँ से जाओ, तो पूरा हॉल पड़ता था। एक गूंज सी आवाज आती थी क्योंकि सब पढ़ते थे। तो अब वो मालूम हुआ कि तो चौकी है, तो किसी को बिलीव नहीं हो रहा था। पहले सब चाहते थे देखने को, औरतें भी बच्चे भी सब, कि ये आवाज कैसे आती है।
You know, on my visit to the National Film Archive, a very interesting story, I noticed a huge pile of film cans lying in the basement near their vaults. And I was very curious to know where these films came from. When I asked Kiran Diwar, the film preservation officer, he told me a very interesting story about how Indian Railways have been unwitting contributor to film archiving in India. Often after film has had its run at the box office, producers find themselves with several prints of the film in hand, and not knowing what to do with them, they put them onto trains with no destination marked on them. They know that if the prints are unclaimed as per the Indian Railways law, it is the responsibility of the Indian Railways to deal with them. And this is how thousands of orphan cans found their way to the NFI, courtesy the railway. Now, what else really happened? The advent of television in India in the 1970s, you saw producers scrambling to look for their film cans as they realized that there was a lot of money to be made out of these old films. You could show it on television, whether it was Doordarshan or local kendras or whatever. But for many, it was already too late. And specifically today, when people are now talking about the death of celluloid, for me, this has been perhaps this has been a very emotional topic, as I grew up watching films on celluloid. The sound of the projector, the flicker, the smell of the film. But you have to accept the reality that, I still continue to shoot on celluloid as much as I can, and if I can afford to do it. But cinema is all about technical innovations. First it was black and white, then came sound, color, people were shooting in different formats, different cameras, different stock, and now it's the age of digital technology. But does that mean that celluloid no longer has a place in history? And a couple of months ago, we presented a 3-day event titled Reframing the Future of Film with acclaimed filmmaker Christopher Nolan and celebrated visual artist Tacita team to really talk about the adversarial narrative of film versus digital. The aim of the event was to speak about the language of coexistence, where each medium has its own specificity, and therefore one need not negate the other. And that is what we are continuously saying, that if an artist wants to use celluloid like all other European countries, he should be allowed to use. There should be things available for him. It need not be what is called into a popular form, but the choice the artist should have, as opposed to no choice today, where either you are forced to do a particular way or you are forced to go the other way. And we spoke about photochemical film and digital in their respective spaces as shooting, exhibition and preservation mediums. But the digital format has made us possible to restore film and see them the way they would have been the day they were released. Now I'm going to just show you a statistics of the shift from film to digital technology. And if you really look at the statistics, I think we were shooting on celluloid till 2014. It's just been 4 years, and does it look like it's been for ages? Does it look like that? It looks like the celluloid vanished some donkey years. We've got so used to statistics. India has turned its back on celluloid in a definite drift in digital technology, but contrary to the popular opinion, we continued to shoot on film till 2014. So what happened to the millions of reels of celluloid film that is in the storehouse of film heritage? Are they to be abandoned, forgotten, or we blindly believe that digital technology has all the answers? Archivists and filmmakers all over the world will tell you that the most crucial element, and I'm going to explain this thing for a lot of people who are going to be, and I have also brought statistics to show you, that we believe as archivists and filmmakers, that the most important element is your original camera negative of a film shot, and celluloid is still worth weighing in gold. And I'll give you that example very soon. In India, the popular misconception among filmmakers, copyright holders and industry stakeholders is that digitization makes the original camera negative obsolete. Labs are shut down literally all over the country and discarded their film cans on scrap heap, and producers are not interested in taking possessions of their films. None of the Indian laboratories engaged in film restoration have photochemical facilities. Producers, copyright holders and public at large are quite satisfied with basic digital restoration at a low cost, poor quality DVDs and accessing film on YouTube. And I'm going to show you this chart, which is very, very important. Have a look at this chart of the different lifespans. And you can see the lifespan of what is hard drive, but look at the lifespan of celluloid. And I want to just explain this a little bit to people who are not aware. Today I went to meet Varsha Bansal, the granddaughter of R.D. Bansal. And the main reason for that is that she, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I'm giving that example because most of R.D. Bansal's films are very famous and they're also directed by Satyajit Ray. Charurata, Nayak, Kaposh, Mahanagar, all these films are produced by her. And I said, you restored 5 years ago, they are on 2K format. You know that 2K is now a format which has gone out because we are on 4K. Tomorrow we will be on 6K, then we will be 7K, 8K. This game will go on because this is what they want you to keep buying hard drives. They want you to keep buying your mobiles. They want to keep changing your perception. And when we did the workshop with Christopher Nolan, we realized that the latitude of a celluloid is 16K. That means give yourself another 15, 20 years still to reach to the level when 16K will probably reach your house. If there is, I don't know how many years. So celluloid is still worth gold. So what she will have to do again? She cannot upgrade that 2K. That means neither Netflix, neither Amazon will show, because Netflix and Amazon is saying only 4K. And the theaters will not be able to show that film, what she's done on digital. So what does she have to do? She'll have to go back to her original negative, start the process again, and grade it up or digitize it for a 4K format. Then when it becomes 6K, she will need to go back. When it becomes 8K, she will need to go back. This game will go on. Unlike a celluloid where you just took the film, you don't have any server problems or you don't have anything. You just put it on manual on a projector and you would play the film and you will watch the film, right? So this is what has happened, and most people haven't realized this. So what they've done is, they've gone and digitized their films, and then they said, you can take this film. That's how we've got so many films with us. Because you can take this. I've got the main copy on my hard drive, not realizing that the hard drive will probably last 3 to 5 years. And that example, I wish Farhan Akhtar can tell you, Dil Chahta Hai. He transferred all his film, 40-50 hard drives, Dil Chahta Hai, and he sat back. And he thought that, and you know, I would constantly be meeting him because we were shooting and we were friends. I would keep telling him, and he obviously, it never, like all filmmakers and production houses, Excel, one of the biggest production houses, now they're producing a lot of streaming shows and all that, Made in Heaven and all that. But it didn't occur to him. One day, they decided that somebody wanted a DCP, you know, digital cinema projection, which is what you see in movie theaters. And the hard drives were not there. Everything had vanished. But luckily for him, he had the original negative. So he went back, he scanned it again. Can you imagine the whole process of scanning again? And then he has now given us all the negatives in our archive, which I will talk about later, and we are able to preserve. And that is one of the reasons that we're going to talk about a little bit about what does restoration actually mean and how it should be restored. Because we all know that Khandar was rejected at Cannes. Or why was Pyasa and Pyasa, which was restored by Ultra, why did they feel that it was such a poor restoration that it doesn't even fit in the criteria of restoration? And that is because of the low-cost restorations what we are doing here. We are not regarding it as an art form. We are not thinking that Pyasa or a Nayak or a Charulata needs to be like an art form. And when I was part of the restoration of Kalpana, it took us nearly 2 years. Scorsese, was so particular. I learned from him, and I'll give you one example. There's a film called Leopard, or Lucino Visconti. Most of you must have seen it. And there are beautiful red roses in that. And they restored the whole film and they showed it to Scorsese, and he said, I remember as a child, the roses came because Mr. Visconti was from the royal family of Milan, and they used to come specially from Florence. And the red in the film, because I used to watch that film on theatre and it was this way. What went wrong? What went wrong is that you do not consult the cameraman, you do not consult the technicians of the film. You've got a young colorist who's sitting of this age today. He thinks that he can move the machines as the way he likes without keeping the aesthetics of what the film is. And that's what precisely he did. He changed some of the colors, and that is why I say we've got now enough of the sunflower of Van Gogh being yellow. Let's change it to blue here. It's enough. It's high time we change some of the paintings here. Mona Lisa and all. Dekh liya burkha mein abhi kya hai usko, kuch aur karo. So why don't we do all that? Why only to films? Why films are only the example of that? So let me talk about what we mean by full-fledged restoration. There's a general lack of understanding that what it means to restore a film. A full-fledged film restoration goes beyond just digital scanning and cleaning. The approach is same as restoring a work of art or manuscript. The task of restoration involves studying the film and its production history, understanding the filmmaker's vision or his limitation, knowing the work of the cinematographer, the art director, the costume designer, all of which contribute to making the right choices and adhering to the filmmaker's vision. Gathering all existing film and non-film sources is the next crucial step of the restoration process of the work. And here's an example that when I was involved with the lodger of Hitchcock, I went to the BFI there, and what I saw was that they not only had the original negative, but they ran a worldwide campaign to collect all the material together, and each frame was being checked with 3 levels of the same material together. Which is the best particular frame for that scene? Is the director made a different version? Because many versions, many places you had a director's cut, then the distribution companies made their own cuts, sometimes sneakily, sometimes all kinds of things have happened. So you need to check each and every material, and then you need to have somebody who exists from that time. We did a whole campaign of Kalpana, of sending people across and asking them what were their images in mind when they were watching Kalpana, or when you did Nidhanya. So unless you are able to do it like an art form and gather all the information, restoration becomes very expensive. I want to talk about one very important effort by the Film Heritage Foundation. Is that what really bothered me was that we had a lot of celluloid films which would come to me, and I would suddenly say, my God, look at the celluloid, why can't we save it? And I had no answers. And this is something which still bothers me, and I keep talking to my team. But we got the first Konkani film. A filmmaker came to my office, brought the Konkani film in a newspaper. Is it there? Yeah, this is called Mogacho Ando. Now, why this film is so important? It's the first Konkani film made in 1950, during the time of the Portuguese. After that, there was no other film made till 1960, when they became part of the Indian government. So when he came in a newspaper, let's see some of the images of the film. Look at the way it's come. Now, do you believe, is there an image after that? Yeah. Do you believe we can save this film? Does anybody believe we can save this film? And so what do? Just treat it like human beings. Its films are like human beings. We put them through ICU. Same thing. But the problem is, once it goes through the ICU and you come out of it, you're going to end one day. It's just that we'll prolong the illness. So same way, we took it through the hydration and the rehydration treatment, drying, treating it, and using different techniques, just like a lab. And this was such a crucial film, but it just is a very time-consuming, which was done in Bologna. And you can see the lab, what all efforts they did to save it. And also treating it with camphor. So you need somebody with the science background also to be with you to be able to accomplish this project. And then it was done through a sprocketless scanner. That means frame by frame it was scanned. And but look at it. Now, this is before restoration. You've got the image. This is before restoration. But one of the most wonderful things was that I went and showed this to the actress of this film, and she got so excited. She called her son, who was probably also working somewhere, and said, because there was nothing existing except this little one reel, she said, and this was in Mumbai, and she said, "Now do you believe I acted in a film?" You know, and that's what films do, you know. So I'm going to now just talk about a little bit about Apu trilogy, restoration, which is what would interest a lot of people. These films were of course shown last year, but you can see that the original negatives were, they were sort of burnt in a fire. In July 1993, there was a fire at Anderson Film Lab in London, and it seems to have started in the nitrate vaults and then spread to the other parts of it. But the fire was bad enough to hit many of Ray films just before the films were being preserved. And luckily, the Academy had all the burned negatives shipped to them. And upon research, they found that 11 reels and negatives of Aprajito existed, as well 9 reels of Pateh Panchali and 2 reels of Apur Shansar. And you can see the kind of work which was done on this, that the frames were literally, were replaced, means the sprockets were replaced, and months of hard work went on to the repair of this film. The sound was cleaned up, and lots of people flew down. Sharmila Tagore went there, and many people we know that they were constantly being worked upon on each and every part of it. Materials were got from all parts of the world to be able to restore these films. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. And you can see that there was a lot of shake on that particular frame that was stabilized for this famous train sequence. Yeah, I think we can stop there. Yeah. You know, the country has about 10 different film industries, or maybe more now, producing the largest number of films in the world, with 4 major South Indian film industries, which account for 60% of our total production. Interestingly, mega stars of these industries went on to head governments in these states, but did nothing for the cause of preserving their cinematic history. As per the statistics, the Censor Board of 2017, we produced 1,986 feature films in 45 languages. Can you believe it? What a nightmare for the Censor Board. 45 languages. Yet, there is a National Film Archive, and now with the emergence of Film Heritage Foundation, which we are a very smaller archive, there is not a single major archive in this whole country which is so inadequate. Film preservation, according to me, should be taken up on a war footing, with each filmmaking state should have its own archive and the development cost to train film archivists who can take this mission forward and provide viable career opportunities in this field. I want to talk a little bit about Film Heritage Foundation and the foundation, what we set up. I'd just like to take a few minutes. We started the Film Heritage Foundation, as Dr. Singh said, in 2014, and our objectives was to create urgent need to preserve both filmic and non-filmic material in its original format, to train indigenous resources of film archivists and restorers, and to develop educational programs. We did our first film preservation. This is our board of advisors, brand ambassador. Our objectives we have done. So what is the first thing we needed to do was to conduct film preservation workshops. So we did the first one in 2015. We had the support of Scorsese's Film Foundation, and the 7-day intensive workshops, including theory, practical classes covering film identifications, film repair, digital and sound restoration. We've been conducting workshops in Pune, then we did in Chennai, then of course our last workshop was in Calcutta, where you can see some of the images to follow. These are some of our This was the one in Chennai where we conducted. This was the one in Calcutta last year where we were here. You can look at the film repair. Also, we do photographic and paper conservation, which includes, related with film, posters. And then we have these awards. This was thanks to Dr. Singh Gupta. We have this wonderful picture of all the great archivists. Impact over the last 4 years, we've introduced now 200 individuals to the best practices of film preservation and restoration, witnessed a change in the attitude of the film industry. Several participants have gone overseas for higher education and applied for jobs at the Film Heritage Foundation or the NFAI. There's a change in the government policy with the start of the National Film Heritage Mission, and we are hoping that state governments like Kerala, Karnataka and West Bengal will start setting up their own archives. We are hopeful. And thanks to Sri Lanka's participation in all our workshops, we have begun a movement not only in Sri Lanka, we are working closely in Nepal to save their film heritage, and we are proud to say that they're on the way to building a new film archive in their countries. The Film Heritage Foundation has a growing collection of non-filmic. We have scripts, posters, lobby cards, song booklets. In our we do poster restoration, our conservators, and this is all in humidity controlled and archival storage facilities. We've developed our own cataloging system. You can see the harmonium that belongs to K.L. Sehgal, the original harmonium given by the family. We are the custodians of materials of P.K. Nair, Kedar Sharma, also who had a connection with Calcutta, A.R. Kardar, J.B.H. Wadia, Sham Benegal, Saeed Mirza, V.K. Murthy, Pran Saab, Kundan Shah, Aruna Raje Patil, and many others. We have a growing collection of films, 35, 16 and 8, which includes films of Mr. Bachchan, Sham Benegal, Govind Rani, Kumar Shani, Vishal Bhardwaj, Mani Ratnam, Buddhadev Das Gupta, Bhim Singh Khurana, and all the names which you can see. We've developed a very unique program for children, which is called Do You Speak Cinema, that teaches them about the evolution of cinema and its unique language. We continuously do these workshops. In fact, when I go back, we are having a workshop on the 4th in Mumbai with kids. We've published 2 books which are very important. One is the first book on film preservation and restoration. It talks about also identifying the most important films, 60 most important films in India which needs urgent restoration. The list was compiled by P.K. Nair and me together, so that list is important. We also took out a book on P.K. Nair's writings called Yesterday's Film for Tomorrow. Our future plan is our next big workshop is in Hyderabad, which is going to take place in December 2019. Anybody interested should apply for that workshop. We're building a new film vault, expansion of our non-film archive, and our new publication on the book of Baburao Painter, the great pioneer, who's really one of the greatest. I would say filmmaking didn't begin from Falke. Falke was the original, but if you're really talking about creative ideas and thoughts, it began from Baburao Painter, from Kolhapur. Our vision is to build world-class moving image. This is what we are planning with the film industry, and think we hope that we will be able to reach our vision of this planned site, which will house the Center for Learning on Archiving and Preservation and Research, which would be situated a little out of Mumbai. So lastly, I'd just like to say that India has a singular cinematic legacy that is endangered. What is lost, we need to find. What is there, we need to restore. And what we create, we need to preserve. It's time we recognize cinema as a national treasure, one that must be saved and protected. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Any questions anybody wants to ask? I'm happy to answer. Yes. Of course, sir.
Two questions. You mentioned about Gulzar Sahab assisting Bimal Roy in
Yes.
Well, Kabuliwala was directed by Helen.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It was produced by him. Yeah.
Gulzar Sahab, as far as I know, started with assisting Bimal Roy with Sujata. And number 2 is that the cause of film preservation and restoration is a very important thing, agreed. But who do you think will pay the enormous costs for the restoration of each film? Film Heritage Foundation or others can't do that.
Yeah.
Isn't it the duty of producers?
Yeah, I think, so answering your first question, Gulzar Sahab was with him in Gupta on the set of Kabuliwala, and he worked on that. Gulzar Sahab started his career with Bandhani, so that was earlier in thing, where he also wrote Mura Mura Anglai. So that's all. But coming to the fact that, yeah, that's a big worry, Ranjindra. I also want to say that Mr. Ranjan Das Gupta is, he's one of the few people who's responsible for putting film preservation really on the map. As much as I'd like to thank him for that, because he's been instrumental in doing that. But funding for an NGO like ours is a problem. One of the big problems which we have is we presume that everything should be done by the government. That's the way. ये problem है government को करना चाहिए, वो problem है government को करना चाहिए. And saying all this, it has become such a bad, my team just went, Shah Rukh had acquired a film, Arjun, that's right, Arjun, Shah Rukh Khan, he was very fond of the film. But what we went and saw was melted Arjun. And then completely melted, nothing exists, believe me, nothing exists. What exists is a DVD kind of a copy. Beta cam, okay, which he bought it so that he could use it on these television and thing, but television won't accept it unless it's a certain format now. Arjun, which is a popular, successful film of Sunny Deol, who's standing for elections today in Gurdaspur. I wish he had paid a little more time to save this film, Let's hope. Yeah, let's hope that. Yeah. So unfortunately, we have lost Arjun completely, and we went and checked that. The team went and checked that particular print, and this is what is happening of the latest. So there is a problem with funding. The producers should pay, and that is the whole problem we face day and night. When recently we acquired even Mr. Buddhadev Das Gupta's film. They were lying in terrible conditions in Prasad Labs, Uttara. The original negative, 2 prints, then even Girish Kasarwadi's films, or so many filmmakers, Mandi. And now, if any of you want to see a Shyam Benegal film in a theatre, I doubt whether you can see it. You can see it on a DVD, for sure. But in a theatre, how do you watch it? You need to digitize the film to be of a certain format, because the theatres take only 4K today, or even 2K they can take. But none of his films are digitized. So only his digital films. So if you want to watch Mandi or Manthan or any of those films, I'm sorry, you cannot watch it. You'll have to watch it on a DVD projection. That is why even Rinki Roy is showing Bimal Roy's films, Madhumati, on a DVD. Madhumati on a DVD. And V.K. Murthy, who's donated all his material to us, including his light meters and everything. That was one of the most sweetest moments, because Govind Dhanani came with me to collect the material from his daughter, and he carried his bag right till the end, saying that as an assistant, I used to carry V.K. Murthy's bag. The man who shot Kagas Ke Phool and Saab Bibi, not Saab Bibi Gulam, but Pyasa. He used to always say, where did you watch my film? He would ask me. You watched it on internet? I said, no, sir. My work is not good there. Because it all looks the same. The contrast which Guru Dutt used to light up and shoot with, are you going to judge that on the damn DVD? Or the man who spent hours learning and filming and watching it on celluloid and showing it on a big screen? So that is the sad part. And even in West Bengal, where we are sitting here, we have lost so much. Where are the films? Only they. Because international fame, acclaim, everything. So there are enough people, but you had so many prolific filmmakers here. I mean, there's so many of them. What about their films? And that's the big problem for a foundation like ours, that we've just got too much to handle. Just now we're looking into Zuni, we're looking at Uttara, we're looking at Mandi. The negatives are all in their bad conditions. We need to digitize them, we need to find funds. Producers are not willing to pay the money, they rather let it die. We had an interesting mail from a producer where the foundation charges sometimes, not with all cases, am I right? Only on certain exceptions with producers make money, that please pay us 100 rupees for keeping the cans. 100 rupees, right? You know what the producer said? One of the biggest international producers, I'd rather let it die than give the 100 rupees. So then we took the call. I said, don't pay, we'll preserve it. So it's a mission for all of us, picking up cans from here with health, with everything, when they smell of vinegar syndrome. So yes, Dada, I mean, I know that you've been very concerned about this, because he's been a well-wisher of mine, and this question has come more from a concern point of view than anything else. But I think we will find a way, and that is why the public is very important for us. Because finally these films are accessible by public, and the more they see these films, the more interest they show, it will happen at some point of time. Mr. Bachchan takes a lot of interest, and we've had other people from the film industry, so I'm sure. Yeah. Any more questions, please?
The print of English Guide,
Yeah.
Scripted by Paul Buck and Devanand's first Indo-US co-production,
Yeah.
has just recently been discovered in a laboratory in New York. It was missing, and Devanand had been desperately looking for it. As well as the print of the English version of Teen Devia, Oh Boy and Three Girls. So, would you like to take over the charge of preserving them?
Yeah. If they approach us, and also if Sunil Anand doesn't keep it under his bed, which he's done to all his major negatives and refusing to part with it, they're going to one day end with those negatives. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this fascinating, absolutely fascinating lecture. I have two questions. One is that as you showed us that the restoration is such a laborious, time-consuming and painstaking process. How much of it is driven by technology, and what's the importance? What is the role of hand skills into it? I'm asking this because we are a museum and we depend a lot on hand skills in restoration and conservation of paintings. You showed us labs in Bologna, and much of this, as I understand, is technology driven. But what is the role of hand skills, and what is the kind of pool of people who are skilled enough and trained to do it in India?
Yeah.
Right. That's the first one, and the other one is funding. Of course, is a major issue, and I'm saying this in the context of a crisis. For this has become a much discussed thing in Kolkata. One of the local museums, which has a great collection of folk art, the Guru Shadar Museum, is threatened with closing down because of stoppage of.
I am aware of that one, yes.
Yes. And so there is a campaign to crowdfund its survival. So because it's about film heritage, and obviously this is something that concerns all corporate sector. So how much access do you have to corporate social responsibility, to crowdfunding? I saw your posters called Donate Now.
Yeah.
How responsive are the people and the other sectors to that kind of fundraising activities?
Yeah. I'll answer Dr. Singh, the first one. The initial stage of restoration starts with film repair. And we were very fortunate that the best person in the film repair in the world was a lady called Mariana. She came here. And that's completely hand job. It's like an artist. And I wish people who came, I think you came and people who came, you would see her as if she's working on a painting. So that repair cannot happen without the use of hands, because that's the first step. And that means your repair of your celluloid, where you change. And if you come to an archive where two people, Malvika and Praveen, who are working on, for film conservators who work on repairing the film, that means exactly like how you saw, the sprockets to be changed, looking at every frame, cleaning the frame, seeing the image, this thing, that's completely driven by that. The fact that when it goes to scanning, a lot of people have the misconception, and that is where the big problem in India is, where we are fighting. Scanning is exactly like a Xerox. We send a peon, jaake Xerox karke lao. Kabhi wo seedha lata hai, kabhi wo teda lata hai, kabhi wo karta hai. Here also in our scanning, we have put our peons there. Because all these jobs, even in film repair, were done by people really not passionate. I mean, that is what we were trying to create. We were trying to create with our workshops job opportunities and people to come forward. So scanning is exactly like a DOP kind of a mindset, where you are scanning each frame, and different scanners. Like if you have an ARRI scanner, which is one of the best scanners, or you have different scanners give you different timings and different ways, and some scan frame by frame per second or whatever. The exposure and the latitude has to be followed. So you require a certain amount of artistic interpretation, which is what these foreigners have. That they get some of the people who may not be fully artists, but they have to have a knowledge of the way the film will be looking in terms of the contrast, in terms of many of the things, as opposed to one light button which is switched. One light button which switches is, a very interesting example was that Rene, who was one of the great filmmakers whom I deeply admire, his one film, he said, I never lit up that man on that screen, he was dark. Suddenly I'm seeing him in this restored version. Because the camera pulls back, and in one of his films, and suddenly you see this dark shadow, and suddenly you see him now lit up from the back and thing. And that is where the problems have arisen. That was not the colorist. That was how the film was scanned. So scanning is your very, very extremely important artistic medium, which you need the right people. And otherwise, anybody can scan. It's as simple as a Xerox. Once you're taught, it's on. So film restoration is a very large component of hands-on kind of a thing. Right from when you put it in the lab, when you're rescuing it, to the film repair, to the scanning, and what about accessibility, when you're taking it out to the public. You've got such brilliant film historians. I mean, I know Cecilia, who works with the Chaplin project. She restored Chaplin, they restored Buster Keaton, and how they brought these people out, and it was through their writings, through their work, through their actually physically working on those very hard art, including they had to change all the caption titles in the middle which would come. because most of the negatives had gone, and people had these old scratch prints, and all that was done by hand. I mean, there was so much of work on hand, and we've been trying for the last 4 years to sort of find people. That's why these workshops. And what is the thing about these workshops was, one of the beliefs of mine was that 70 to 80% would be free. We would choose the people, because we said in a country like India, you should give the opportunity to people from all over to come forward to join this movement and to be. So we've been giving scholarships. Tata Trust has been one of our partners. Viacom has been a partner. So we've got that. Talking about the second point about the corporates coming, the corporates always tell me, even though Viacom is actually a film company more than a corporate company, but Tata Trust is there. But most of the corporates tell me, Bollywood should be paying for it. They're earning so much of money. This Bachchan is filing a tax of 80 crores or 70 crores in a year or whatever. They could easily fund it, or Amir, or they're making some 350 crores. So this debate constantly keeps happening. And one of the fundamental problems is that I was in Bombay just before I came, where my friend Abhishek Poddar is starting a movement. I know that you're aware of that, sir, MAP, which is setting up a museum in the middle of Bangalore, a wonderful museum and it's an art museum, one of the biggest museums. And he collected 100 crores and he's leasing 100 more crores. And I found it, I was just looking, and I was there sitting at the audience, and I was just thinking how much art easily attracts that kind of money, while film, because it's not regarded as an art form, finds it even tough to raise any kind of money. We've had Mr. Bachchan also propagating the fact to donate now. We're running various donate campaigns, but I don't think that they've been very successful. People haven't really come forward in terms of donation and thing. And then the misconception of people when they have posters and lobby cards and all of that, the fact that we are an archive and we are not a collector anymore. So we don't want to sell, or we don't want to part with it. We preserve it for you. I mean, it's an archive. You come, you see it, you use it, or you want to display it, you write to us. There's a particular formality to be followed. And I think that part still, after 4 years, we are slowly coming for people to realize that there is a private institution or an NGO under the government, which actually is an archive. And it's not just the National Film Archive. Because in America, everybody knows that out of 118 film archives, there are 118 film archives, or 120 when we did last analysis, small, big, whatever. But the recognized archives are about 10, 12. And then there are subsidiary archives, and all universities have a film archive. Film archive with a running staff of about 35, 40 people. I mean, there's not a small film archive. They have everything, UCLA, but they've all, so that kind of awareness, which is in America, that except Library of Congress, which is owned by the state. The rest of the archives are private institutions or initiatives or trust or whatever. That belief has still not come. It is there in art because they are art collectors with a lot of money, but not on films. So we do struggle with that. We do struggle, even though our workshops and our various activities are there. But we hope now with the awareness which we have sort of creating, we'll be able to get. And that's why we have to rally mostly on Bollywood stars.
What about government funding?
Well, the government funding is a bit difficult. I mean,
Government is not interested in this.
no, they are. I mean, you see, again, they have. There is a lot of, especially today, there's a different way of looking at things. I don't know after elections what the government's mode will be, and that constantly keeps changing also. Also, I think we, even when we did the workshop at the NFAI, we found it tough to get funding from them. So this is not in their agenda. They rather give the money to the NFAI because there's already a government institution which they're supposed to already finish the whole lot of digitization and all that which has already been given. But our whole belief is that there is so much of material across India that you not only need to preserve what is there in NFI, but there's so much, nobody's overlapping each other. Everyone, and that is one of our big things, is that why only rely on them, the government, because they've already got their hand full. to look after. Already they've got some 15,000 films to really reach to their targets and meet, and that will take another 10-15 years to save them. But what happens to the hundreds of films which are still live? And where the government really doesn't work is not on feature films, where we work. Our whole focus is on artistic films, home movies, documentaries, experimental films. What about them? That's not the focus of the government. Documentaries for them is absolutely a no-no. They think, now especially, most of Anand Patwardhan's film or any of those films find it really tough to be preserved. So that's how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great contrast, because in Germany, in Maxkula Bhavan, the Germans used to show us silent films made by them and films made in the 30s, pre the Nazi era. And so we were so happy that, so wonderfully they had preserved it. And quite a contrast as you showed that how we have done with our films. Now, Bengal, before Dadasaheb Phalke, Hiralal Sen had made his first film.
I mentioned that.
And but I'd like to know that what about those films?
Nothing remains.
Nothing remains.
Nothing at the moment remains.
And before Ray, Bengal made classic artistic films, like made by P.C. Barua, Devaki Bose, Dhiren Ganguly.
Yeah, I saw Barua's wonderful Devdas Bengali one in Dhaka at the archive. Very proudly I saw it, and I was very thrilled and happy to see it. That was one of my dreams, to see his film. Yeah.
So, and even Chokher Bali, the Tagore classic, was made, and Tagore himself had seen it and appreciated that film. So is that original Chokher Bali? Is it?
I'm not sure about Chokher Bali.
The original one, made by Tagore, which was appreciated by Tagore himself.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure about that one, but I know I've seen the Barua one.
I see.
We don't have it, but Bangladesh has it.
So do you think that since this is because of cultural slavery to the West, Ray films are preserved because the West has recognized it, but P.C. Barua, D.C. Ganguly, Devaki Bose, and since Ritik Ghatak, Bimal Roy, since they have not been recognized by the West, so forget it. Are we still cultural slaves of the West?
It's to do with that. It's just that we didn't recognize film as an important part to be preserved. And I think we just came in too late. The awareness really began when, I would say, when we started the foundation in 2014, because that was my experience when I was trying to make a film, or I was trying to see, and then my interaction with the Scorsese Foundation, that really changed my opinion. That till then, as a filmmaker, you really are not concerned with what's happening around you. But Scorsese made you concerned about film history and the films he grew up watching, and how important as a filmmaker it is for you to continuously watch films, that's how you learn filmmaking. It's like how you read literature, you see films. And when I wanted to do that, I started realizing that we've lost so many of our films, and nobody was really concerned about saving them. So I don't think it was a concern or the Western concern or non-Western concern. Ray, because he was already, he had attained that kind of height and that kind of success, it was easy to find funding to save his films and to restore his films and things. But why would the West be interested to, look at all the other films? It's a responsibility of within the. So by the time we came in, and by the time everybody woke up to this whole thing, Dhiren Ganguly or DG or one of them, all their films were lost. Or the Madans who were making prolific films here in Calcutta, which was really the home of so-called films. Yeah. And still we're losing films left, right, and center. I just gave you example of Arjun, and there's so many films, and it's just that it's difficult to, when you have so much, then it becomes, in a country like India where you're producing nearly 2,000 films a year, and the whole digital dilemma. The Academy did a whole report on digital dilemma. Is that people are not aware today, when digital is just 4 years old, that really what is the best medium to preserve. And how does an independent filmmaker, or even when you're shooting films, or you want to preserve something which you've shot on your phone, what is the best way to take care of it, or look after it, or what is the way to go about it? And I think that sort of dilemma is sort of prevalent. So I think the whole flux of preservation is something which is really not as yet stuck to people's minds, and realization is very important. One is the film should be treated as an art form, and second, that it's not just the responsibility of the government, because it's not possible for any single government to take care of that many number of films. Or the film industry. The realization of the film industry has to be there. I mean, to preserve all Uttam Kumar's films or films of Tapan Sinha, which is gone, I believe. You know, most of Tapan Sinha's films don't exist. And we can, or the low quality DVDs, would you like, that's why I just gave you an example. Would you like to watch a P.K. Murthy or Subrata Mitra's work on those horrible YouTube channels? Those are only, you know, for research purposes or something, you want to just do that, just to see and write and think. But to be able to showcase and enjoy the film, I think most of us see it in the view that you've already seen the film before. So you just know that film exists.
This is the same case with Bengali films of Bijoy Ghosh, Piyush
Yeah,
Ghosh,
yeah.
Ajay Kaur, Asit Sen, Nabratu Kapoor.
And before, Patel Panchali, Sita was universally recognized all over the world. Devaki was Sita. So do you have a print of Sita?
Sita, we don't have. Devaki Bose is Sita.
I have just
Yeah, sure.
2 points. It's good that you mentioned Subrata Mitra after P.K. Murthy. Are you aware of the fact that after his demise, there's a board that has
Yes,
come up
I-
at his
yeah.
place, like Subrata Mitra Archive, and none of us know what is happening. As an archive, are you aware of what is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you an interesting story on that. And if you see my Immortals, which is 55 minutes about objects, I happened to go to that house, not once. But interesting thing was, Bachuda, his brother.
He also died.
You know, I know.
Yeah.
So my visits would be that Bachuda is not here, but Avik and I, Avik Mukhopadhyay was from FTI with me, one batch senior to me, but great friend, and having shot a lot. We would visit that house, and we would meet Bachuda. Camera was underneath his bed, tied up. He had a meter which he would keep checking the weather conditions and what all would happen, and then he would be watching Saath Bahu serial right there, and he would talk about his brother, and he'd talk, and I would keep trying to convince him that you need to preserve this, give it to some archive, give it to some museum, give it to. So he would keep engaging. Where will you keep it? I said, don't worry about me keeping it. Why don't you give it to something different? You know, just institutions, and that would happen over the period of nearly 10 years. 10 years, not a single trip of mine went where I didn't visit him with Avik. Even shot him in Immortals. And one day, when I got to know that he passed away, and I was very this thing. I said, what happened to all the material, because they had Nagara and everything.
Yeah, they had a lot.
All the things.
I visited that house often.
Yeah. And suddenly I saw outside written Subrata Mitra archive. And I said, oh wow, there's an archive which is opened up. I must go, but I wasn't allowed in, you know. But what was the sweetest thing was that Avik, who knew my persistence to all this, when the workshop was concluding on the last day, he gave me the Subrata Mitra light meter, which Subrata Mitra had presented to him personally for the archive. So at least I have something of Subrata Mitra. I don't know about the archive, but yeah, we are very, I mean, I know people are very concerned, so is Shumatra, and my conversations with people that what really is happening to that place is, because that property is worth, I think it's more to do with the property and then the thing, yeah.
It's been a kind of forced takeover by some individuals.
So,
Right.
is going to handle promoters actually.
Yeah. The other thing is about this funding business. I was just wondering. Of course, you're right in saying that it's not the government which can do everything. Now, people who are going to watch films at Inoxes are spending a lot of money. They don't even care whether they are spending 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 for a single show, right? So, along with all the taxes that is there, if some kind of a cess can be introduced on film tickets to save film preservation cess,
Yeah.
do you think that would be an option, which can then be channeled to a particular organization, which will then really seriously
We had,
take care of that?
in fact, my conversations with Ajay Bijli of PVR and even Inox, and that's why in that particular roundtable, we had invited them also to come, and we were very, very keen that even Book My Show, which which finally gave them to handle the whole event. Also to say that for any of your events, can you put this, but those talks have been very preliminary, but there has been a thought, and we gave them a Taiwan example. Taiwan example was very easy, that in fact the government went to the whole campaign of starting with your credit cards. Every time you would spend a credit card, that little money would go to the Taiwanese film. They did an opinion poll of the 100 most important Taiwanese film you want to save. And they made a list of that. And then they asked the public, so they needed volunteers, and then they needed money. And they got both. So interestingly, even Titash, the money has come from the Bangladesh archive. Beautiful restoration. So Indians are not very good at that. Even Burkina Faso is doing very well in restoration.
The producers was Bangladeshi.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying it was lying with the NFAI, the negatives, but we couldn't erase because Katak is finally. So somehow we don't have that quality about giving money in terms of.
Yeah, but if you ask for money, even the producers won't give you your 100 rupees to
No,
present
they
their
won't.
can. It has to be something which is forced, which is incorporated in the system. It's part of the thing.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so I think that would be the ultimate way to sort of raise funds for something like this.
Yeah, I mean they don't want to give it for their own films, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
Any other question? If not, then this comes to an end, and we all thank you, Shivendra ji,
thank you
for fascinating. You have given us a wake up call, and this is this is a battle. We are in our small ways. We are with you, but this is something that we didn't really know, and you have shown us the real scenario, the really alarming kind of scenario that it is. So we from everybody around here, we wish you all the very best in your campaign, your crusade to protect this heritage, and I hope we will have you back to talk about the progress of this critically important campaign.
I'd love to keep coming back.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
So ladies and gentlemen, please join me.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.